I once went to see a psychic medium. Near the end of the reading, she began communicating with spirits she claimed were around me. I'm still not entirely sure what the correct term for that is, but the experience itself was unsettling. For several minutes, she kept going back and forth as though she were having a conversation with someone sitting near us. She repeatedly mentioned a young man who had died in a tragic way and said that he was being extremely persistent about wanting to speak with me. The problem was that I had absolutely no idea who she was talking about. Sitting across from this woman, while she appeared to have an entire conversation with someone I couldn't see, was already uncomfortable enough. Then she told me that the man was apparently using a lot of colorful language and insisting that I knew exactly who he was. I kept listening, waiting for something to make sense, but nothing did. After several minutes of her repeating the same thing, I finally felt awkward enough to address whoever she claimed was there. I basically apologized to the invisible person in the room and told him that I was genuinely sorry, but I had no idea who he was. Then the medium asked me a different question. She asked whether I had a brother and wondered if the message might actually be intended for him instead. That's when something clicked. I asked her, "Bob?" Bob had been my brother's lifelong friend. Unfortunately, he had become addicted to opiates and spent years struggling with the addiction. Eventually, he died from an overdose. Because we lived in a small town, people talked openly about what had happened, and some people believed his overdose had been intentional. The medium then told me that I needed to pass a message on to my brother. One of the most important parts of the message was that Bob wanted him to know that it had been an accident. Later that day, I called my brother, who was about as skeptical as I was. I told him what had happened, and he immediately hung up on me. About 10 minutes later, he called back. He then told me something that completely changed the situation. His wife had visited a different medium at a completely different location about a week earlier, and she had come home with the exact same message. It was the same person, the same explanation, and the same insistence that the overdose had been an accident. I don't know what to make of experiences like that, but if you ever happen to meet a genuinely convincing medium, I imagine it would be pretty difficult not to question everything you thought you understood. I work at a veterinary clinic, and over the years I've heard countless stories from people describing strange experiences after their pets died. There have been so many of them, and they've come from people with completely different personalities and beliefs that I've stopped automatically assuming they're all made up. One story that immediately comes to mind involved a woman whose ferret had recently died. For the first few nights afterward, whenever she went to bed, she would feel what seemed like her ferret sniffing her ear. Another experience happened to me with my own cat. At first I assumed it was one of my cats walking across my bed, but eventually I started wondering if it might have been another cat entirely, possibly one that belonged to a previous family who had lived in the house. I had 2 cats at the time, and they didn't particularly like each other. They had developed an arrangement where one mostly stayed downstairs because the other preferred being upstairs. The downstairs cat died in March 2019. The strange experience didn't happen until November 2020, and I was in my upstairs bedroom at the time, which was somewhere that particular cat normally never went. But I felt a cat jump onto my bed. I was convinced it was one of them. I had been sick with COVID for 5 months, and those months were miserable. I spent 4 weeks completely away from work before eventually returning, even though I was still significantly sick. My job was considered essential, so I had to keep working because I still had bills to pay. I never developed a serious fever. My temperature only reached around 100.6 once, and most of the time it stayed somewhere between 99.5 and 99.9, so I wasn't experiencing the kind of high fever that could easily explain hallucinations. During those weeks, I spent most of my time in bed. That's when I repeatedly began feeling my remaining cat jump onto the foot of the mattress. I would feel the weight and movement, then hear or sense the steps coming toward me. Eventually, the steps would stop near where I could lift the blanket and let her crawl underneath so she could cuddle with me. But when the movement stopped, I'd look over and discover that she wasn't there. You can hear and feel a cat jumping off a bed, so I knew it wasn't simply the cat climbing up and immediately leaving. Still, I would check on her because I wanted to rule out every normal explanation. Sometimes I'd find her sitting on the cat tree in the hallway. Other times, she'd be curled up asleep on my dresser. In either case, she had clearly been there for some time. There was no way she could have jumped onto my bed, walked toward me, immediately jumped down, climbed onto the dresser, and fallen instantly into a deep sleep. Yet I kept telling myself that I must have imagined it. Then it happened again. I would feel those unmistakable footsteps and think, okay, maybe I imagined it the first time, but there's no way I imagined this one. I would wait for the cat to reach me so I could lift the blankets and let her in, and once again, nothing. A few hours later, the exact same thing would happen. I'd tell myself that maybe the previous experience had been in my head, but surely this time the cat was actually walking across the mattress. Again, there would be nothing there. This happened anywhere from once to 3 or 4 times a day on most days while I was sick. The experience didn't really fit with the idea that it was the cat I had lost either. The cat that died had spent most of its time downstairs, and this was happening upstairs in my bedroom. I don't know what it was. I don't know whether there is a supernatural explanation, or whether my exhausted and sick mind was somehow creating the sensation. All I know is that it felt exactly like a cat walking across my bed. It happened only during those months when I was extremely ill and isolated in bed, and once I recovered, it completely stopped. Whoever or whatever it was, I can't say. But during a time when I was incredibly sick and miserable, I appreciated the company. My parents bought a house before I was born, and according to my family, there was always something strange happening there. My mom owned this unusual music box that was also designed like a cigarette dispenser. It was shaped like a little coffin, and when you pressed a button, it would play a version of the Death March while raising a cigarette for you. One night, completely unexpectedly, it started playing at around 3 in the morning. It had never done that before, and as far as I know, it never did it again. Then there was the incident with my uncle's car keys. It was the middle of a very hot summer day, and he tossed his keys on top of the television before going somewhere. When he was ready to leave, the keys were gone. Everyone searched for them, but they couldn't find them anywhere. Eventually, the keys turned up during winter, inside the pocket of a coat that had been hanging in the closet. Another woman who visited the house also lost her car keys. Those were eventually found underneath some weeds in the backyard. But the animals seemed to react to the house more than anyone. Cats refused to stay inside. Our dog would become so desperate to get out that it would literally try to tear the door down. Even our parakeet acted as though something was frightening it, constantly squawking as if something was after it. Eventually, the bird died while my mom was holding it. Then there was something that happened to me. My bed was positioned in a way that allowed me to see straight through the bedroom door and down the hallway. One night, I woke up, looked toward the hallway, and saw what appeared to be a child standing there. It looked about 8 years old and was dressed like a Pierrot clown. It wasn't simply standing there either. It was staring directly at me in a way that felt threatening. I screamed as loudly as I could. My mom came running into the room, and I started babbling that Hausenklaus was trying to get me. I had no idea where that name came from or why I said it. Decades later, my family found an old cassette recording of my sister talking with my grandmother. On the tape, my sister described being afraid of her room because she believed Mr. Potato Head was watching her from the windowsill. She also said she was scared of ghosts. My mom told her there was no such thing as ghosts, and at that exact moment, the light began flickering. One Halloween, the weather was unusually cold, and everyone in the house was sick. My mom still decorated the place and put candy out for us. She took some of my dad's clothes, stuffed them, and arranged them in a chair, with a pumpkin sitting on top as a head. When we entered the room, the pumpkin suddenly rolled directly toward us. My dad was a huge skeptic and never seemed interested in paranormal explanations, but even he experienced something he couldn't explain. One night, their bed suddenly began shaking. He assumed one of us was crawling into bed with them, so he turned on the light. Nobody was there. He never found an explanation for what had caused the bed to move. There were other things too. The entire neighborhood seemed to have an unusually bad problem with rats and roaches for reasons nobody could really explain. My family also experienced more sightings, strange whispers that sounded almost like a radio playing quietly somewhere nearby, and what appeared to be strange orbs showing up in old home videos. Those were simply the incidents that stood out the most. Years after my family had moved away, I spoke with an old neighbor who had remained in the area. They told me something that made all those memories even harder to dismiss. According to them, people could never seem to stay in that house for very long. Most occupants apparently moved out within a year or two.